Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. Let us be among the first to wish you a happy holidays, whether it be Christmas tomorrow, whether it be the start of Hanukkah, which is tomorrow, whether it be Kwanzaa. Happy holidays from our Tip of the Ice-Burgh family to yours. But I'm your host, Nick Belsky. We got a lot to talk about. I'm joined as always by Nick Horwat. With the holidays being here, we're going to talk about what the ultimate present could be for 5 different members of the Pittsburgh Penguins. What do they need over this holiday break that will help them in spades as they get ready to close out 2024, open up 2025, and hopefully continue in their positive trend? And then speaking of Pittsburgh Penguins and what they need, what are the Penguins doing with Ryan Graves, and what does he need to be able to do to stay within the Penguins lineup? Let's get this started on the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. And let's kick things off with the ultimate presents for some of these Pittsburgh Penguins. We have 5 names here. I have 5 presents for these 5 names. And Horwat, you don't know any of these, so you're going to be reacting on the fly, which is what I love to do. Let's start with Drew O'Connor, and this one's pretty easy. Can somebody gift Drew O'Connor a lucky bounce? Maybe a goal off his ass, maybe a goal off his skate, a goal off of anything will do for Drew O'Connor, because he hasn't scored one in 29 games. He has 6 assists during that time. And really, Horwat, this is a player that coming into the year, some of us expected to take on that bigger role as a top 6 guy. And at this point, I think that ship has sailed for the time being. I think right now, you just need him to kind of play well to maintain a spot within the Penguins lineup, no?
No kidding. We had the discussion about him not having a goal in a long time ago, it feels like at this point. Now, you said that's up to 29 games, which is obscene. Mm-hmm. I can't think of too many forwards, no less, that stick in any NHL lineup going that long without a goal. I mean, even Noel Acciari would bank home a few last year within the 29-game stretch. Even Matt Nieto picked up a couple, if I'm not mistaken, last year before he went down with injury for the year. None are coming to me. I think there was a legend of Riley Sheahan not scoring in Detroit that one year until game 82. I don't think he played all those games, but that's exactly it. It's normally, as a forward, you're not going 82 games without a goal. You're just not. You're not going to stay in the lineup that long, no matter what part of the lineup you're in either. I mean, even the bottom line has to chip in every now and again. This is the threat that we're starting to see with Drew O'Connor. I mean, that's especially considering how he proved that he can be a decent enough finisher last season. This time around, he got his first 3 in the first 6 games. Mm-hmm. And, at that point, you're looking at, early in the season averages, but half a goal a game. That's not bad. That's the kind of thing you want from a top or a bottom 6 winger who might be able to slide up to the top 6. And then 29 games without a goal. It's past a regression to the mean for Drew O'Connor, too. Yeah. I mean, this is concerning and something that needs to be fixed right away and fixed quickly.
Yeah, now there are some games in which you look at it and you're like, oh, he's so close. And there's some games that you watch and you're like, man, if this guy didn't play penalty kill, would he even be in the lineup right now? And I think that's the one thing that's helping him a lot, is that he is one of the most dependable penalty killers the Penguins have among forwards. But at the same time, enough is going to be enough at some point. I mean, I understand we watched Mike Sullivan ice Jansen Harkins for several months last year, despite the fact that he looked like he was incapable of staying up at the NHL level. But I think what we've seen is O'Connor not get to that, because I think that his level of play hasn't been horrible throughout this entire stretch. But I think there are some moments where you look at him and you're saying, okay, his poor play in this game, how much is it the effect of the fact that he hasn't scored in 29? Because once you get to 29, 30, when you're probably listening to this, if he doesn't score against the Philadelphia Flyers, at some point that has to affect the mental, right? I mean, the guy pulled, a Britney Spears. He shaved his head, and that didn't fix it. So I think that a lucky bounce could potentially change the entire trajectory of the season for Drew O'Connor. Hopefully he unwraps something like that in the coming weeks. Let's go over to Blake Lizotte. I got a present for Blake Lizotte. In fact, I got 2 presents for Blake Lizotte because he's been such a good kid this year for the Penguins. How about some better wingers for Blake Lizotte? He came in after his second concussion like a house of fire. 9 points in 9 games played, and I understand. It's only been 3 games. He's playing only 12 minutes a game. You don't expect him to continue to play at a point-per-game pace when he's playing on the fourth line, but that's just it. I think you could, at the very least, get him a modicum of an offensive winger on his sides. Because right now he's dealing with Matt Nieto, who, let's face it, should not be in the lineup over the likes of a guy like Jesse Puljujärvi, who, at this stage of his career, could potentially fit into a fourth-line role, minus the fact that he doesn't kill penalties. And Noel Acciari, who has cooled off considerably from his decent start to the season. Well, you do have a guy like Kevin Hayes, who is right now molded to a fourth-line role where he is responsible defensively. His foot speed has been an issue in certain games for the Penguins, but offensively, he's smart with the puck. He's good at setting people up, and with the wrist shot that Lizotte has displayed over his early days here in Pittsburgh, I'd love to have a guy like Kevin Hayes on his wing to be able to distribute it to him so he gets more opportunities to display it.
Yeah, better wingers for him. And this goes to pretty much, a lot of the discussion too, though, we kind of had with Drew O'Connor, and that Drew O'Connor's sort of filling up a roster spot here. He's kind of filling in a roster spot that if he wasn't there, someone else filters into the lineup, and that adjusts the lines to maybe get Blake Lizotte a better winger than currently Matt Nieto or Noel Acciari. I mean, yeah, we mentioned Drew O'Connor as the one that's taken up a spot, but also Matt Nieto is still in this lineup. And Noel Acciari isn't going to leave because he still brings something crucial to the team, but maybe a different option for Blake Lizotte would be useful. And that's why we're mentioning Nieto and why you're saying Kevin Hayes. Jesse Puljujärvi is still riding the bench every game. So maybe there's to be had there even. I mean, it's a deep team when it comes to the forward core, but at the same time, it's deep by way of a ton of third and fourth liners. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily deep with overloads of skill, but give Blake Lizotte someone who can finish, who can maybe open up some new opportunities, and suddenly you're looking at more of a well-rounded depth for this team.
Yeah, when I look at a guy like Jesse Puljujärvi especially, I feel like he would kind of excel in the chaos offense that Blake Lizotte seemingly likes to play. I mean, Puljujärvi, when he's been in there and when he's been playing his best this year, which has been most of the time that he's been in there, but I'm not going to continue to pound that table. He's good at creating havoc in the offensive zone via the forecheck, via getting in front of the net, via using his big body. And that's something that Lizotte, even though he doesn't have that bigger frame, it's something that he's been doing since he got back in the lineup 9, 10, 12 games ago, I think it was. But I do think that he would benefit from better wingers. I just don't know. Again, is this a situation where we saw Drew O'Connor on Saturday get bumped to center? Is this a situation where you could just switch the two of those two and have Drew O'Connor play as a, as a fourth liner? Meanwhile, as the, Blake Lizotte gets an opportunity on the third line.
And it's a fire call to get him a new position, man. It needs to happen pretty quickly because, I mean, we were talking a few weeks ago about this Penguins team not really going anywhere. We're already sort of looking forward to the draft, to the offseason. But suddenly they've rifled off a couple of wins and have put themselves, pretty close to a playoff spot. I mean, they're on the doorstep all of a sudden again. Now it's going to be a lot of the repeat of last season where it's, hey, they're in the hunt. We don't expect them to get over the edge, but being in the hunt's at least a spot where players like Crosby and Malkin will want to be playing important hockey. And to continue playing important hockey, you need to round out the depth, like I mentioned, and getting Lizotte some wingers, even moving him to a wing for a better center, maybe. Who knows how that all works out? There's plenty of options for this team. And I think getting those right names in there will boost so much for this team and, get them over that hump into a playoff spot again.
Yeah, you mentioned sounding the alarm. We got to sound the alarm for Kris Letang because he needs a consistent defense partner, and that's what I'd like him to unwrap in a couple of days here, because he has been stapled to one man for years, or was, I should say, stapled to one man for years, and that was Brian Dumoulin. Since Dumoulin departed before last season, it's just been helter-skelter at the top of the Penguins defense core. 4 different defense partners this season. That's discounting the fact that there are times in games where he plays several shifts with Erik Karlsson. But when it comes to actual defense partners, Owen Pickering, probably the best so far, I think we'd have to say. But now dealing with an upper body injury, of course, his status is unclear going forward, how much he's going to have to deal with that. Matt Grzelcyk was up there. We know that is probably not something that's going to work. Marcus Pettersson had been up there, but he is also injured week to week, still dealing with a lower body injury. And now on Saturday, we see P.O. Joseph get a handful of minutes up there due to the Owen Pickering injury, and obviously something we've seen in the past as well with Pierre-Olivier Joseph. So of the four, I think it's safe to say Owen Pickering has performed the best, and I think that's including P.O. Joseph in that late season stretch last year where he played almost exclusively with Letang. But somebody needs to step up and just be that guy for Kris Letang. And I honestly, I believe Pickering could be it. So maybe he already opened it. Maybe he kind of peeked in the attic and saw this present already. But I think a healthy Pickering could be the answer to this. But either way, an answer needs to be found.
Yeah, it does. It's tough finding a top line defenseman, period. I mean, the Penguins have two of them. The issue is they're both right shots and they're both offensive minded. So you're not really going to pin them together as your top line, barring absolute disaster. You usually need a good defensive stalwart to play with names like that. And no one's been able to play with Karlsson except for Marcus Pettersson. So that's kind of the staple gun there. Whereas Letang, at least at the right opportunities and at the right times, has his own stout defensive game. He can play the defensive side of things. As he's aged, though, he's kind of lost that trend. He just, he's got geared his focus a bit more toward offense. And it's tough finding a Dumoulin replacement. That's just the long and the short of it. That's because top line defensive defensemen are rare. Like I said, the Penguins have one. It's just he has to play with Karlsson because no one else can make up for or kind of cover for the way Karlsson plays. And then it doesn't help that the depth behind Marcus Pettersson on the left side is Matt Grzelcyk and youngsters, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that's really what hurts that situation. I mean, there's Ryan Graves, but again, you're not going to give him that opportunity. That's just, we'll discuss that. It's, there's just not much by way of filling in that top role. There just isn't. I think they expected it to be Ryan Graves, and we saw how it went. And that's sort of where they're at. It is up to a youngster to step up and prove that he can be a consistent NHLer. And Pickering's done that so far, but much like P.O. Joseph in years past, how long can it be sustainable for genuinely? And it's going to be a game-by-game basis with him. And now that P.O. Joseph's back, maybe there is a bit of, well, okay, we'll just rekindle that and move along because that did work last year. But again, for how long can it? Because P.O. is still relatively young and, it'll be fascinating. But yeah, get Kris Letang, someone he can be consistent with, rekindle anything that works there, and suddenly you got a good top pair again.
Yeah, this isn't the most in-depth of comparisons, but it feels like P.O. Joseph is a Dominic Simone comp, where it's if he's playing with Letang, yeah, maybe he can handle those minutes, but if he's playing with anybody else, anywhere else, he's a third pairing defenseman. And I think that the Penguins would do well for themselves to deploy him as such. Now, of course, they're in a sticky situation when it comes to the Owen Pickering injury as we record this. We really don't have any information outside of the fact that he left Saturday's game after the second period. He didn't return in the third, and it's an upper body injury. That's all we know as of this moment. But, if he's down, I get it. You have to play somebody there, especially with Pettersson out as well, and Grzelcyk showing that he just doesn't work. But I think if Pickering is healthy, that is the guy. And it's tough to put that on a 20-year-old, but he's been up to the challenge to this point, right? Playing 21, 22 minutes a night, which I believe the other day, Phil Bourque said on the broadcast that that's the third most minutes per game of any rookie defenseman at the time being. So you look at that and you say, yeah, it's a lot to put on him, but so far the 20-year-old has held up. You just hope that he doesn't burn out at some point later in this season, whenever it gets to be very important and you just don't have anybody else to turn to when it comes to that top pairing. But either way, Letang is long in the tooth. Let's just put it that way. It'd be nice if he had a defensive partner that could stick by his side for the remainder of his career. So it will help him kind of slow down that fall off of the full rounded game, right? Letang's always been volatile when it comes to offense versus defense and the balance of that. As he's aging, we notice that volatility start to get a little bit more crazy, which is interesting to pair with Erik Karlsson, who I will say, we're not going to talk about him. We're not going to give him a gift, even though he probably deserves one for the way that he's been playing over the last couple of weeks. He has been putting on his Superman cape, as a couple people have alluded to throughout the Penguins, kingdom and the Penguins land. I think he's been really good of late. But again, we've seen over the last season, how long does that persist? I got 2 more gifts to give out here. First and foremost, one gift that should have probably already been given, but you know what? You can retroactively do these things. I don't want to wish injury or harm to anybody, but damn if Ricard Rakell doesn't deserve a spot on Team Sweden's Four Nations roster coming up in February. He has earned it this season, and I understand a large reason as to why he was not selected to Team Sweden was that he struggled last season. But you would think that selection committee, that coaching staff, that managerial staff would have looked at that and say, well, he did have a pretty significant shoulder injury, and he did play with a brace all of last season. And then look at the fact that he is a top 20 goal scorer in the National Hockey League this season, 15 goals, and specifically since being snubbed from Team Sweden has been on absolute fire. 10 points in 8 games, 5 goals, 5 assists. If I'm gifting anything to Ricard Rakell, I'm gifting him a spot on Team Sweden's Four Nations roster because he's earned it.
Yeah, since being snubbed, those 10 points is tied for the most by any Swedish-born player in the NHL. From that date on, it is 5-5, correct? Yes, 5-5 in 7 games played. He and if you want to throw Brian Rust in the conversation, he and Brian Rust are both leading their countries in terms of scoring since those rosters were announced.
Yeah.
Now, Brian Rust makes a little more sense that he wasn't there, but also Mike Sullivan's the coach. There was a little bit of discussion of maybe he should have been. I mean, at least they're having it now. But again, it's not the same comparison. USA is such a deep roster that maybe it also still makes sense, but he's now leading, or at least up there among the leaders of point scorers since that date. And same with Rakell, who is up there, tied with William Nylander, who obviously is already on that team. But I mean, I don't want to say Rakell was a long shot because of last season. He seemed like one. But then you saw what he's been doing this year in finding the net 15 times. He's leading the Penguins in goals right now. On a team that has Sidney Crosby on it, that's surprising, especially by the gap that he's beating him by. That's something special. And, I'm not going to say Rakell deserved his spot, but man, he keeps proving that he really did deserve one. Sweden's also a deep team, and in short tournaments, these rosters were adjusted a bit to sort of have a bit of a defensive mindset in certain areas as well. But still, I think if an injury comes around to, like you said, to a Swede who is already on the team, I mean, you would have to assume he is the first name they call to fill in.
Yeah, you'd have to think that they'd go with the hottest hand, and right now the hottest hand is undoubtedly Ricard Rakell. Let's close this out with Sidney Crosby. Now, what do you get the man who has pretty much everything in this league? I think you get him what he likes the most, and that's matchups against the New York Islanders. This is one that he's actually going to get back-to-back, home and home against the Islanders. That's what's going to happen this upcoming weekend as the Penguins get out of the holiday break here. Historically, his most favorable matchup, 135 points in 87 games played, the most points that he has against any team. And that's coming off the heels of a game against the Philadelphia Flyers, in which that is the team he has the most goals against of any other team in his long, storied 20-year career. So when you look at Crosby versus the Isles specifically, he scored a goal earlier this year in the only game that they've played against each other. And that's been a rarity for Crosby this year. Not a lot of goal scoring happening for the captain, but he does have one to his name already against the Islanders. And I think those back-to-back games against the Isles can get the Penguins set off on the right trajectory following the break. And it has a chance to push Crosby comfortably ahead of that point per game status that he has been kind of playing with all season long to this point. And like I mentioned, the Penguins, they need wins. They especially need wins against Metropolitan Division foes. And this is going to be a great opportunity to do so. I understand Crosby has basically everything, but hey, give him a couple games, one in Pittsburgh, one on the island, and watch him do what he's done throughout 20 years. And that's torture that fan base.
Just another couple of games for him. Yeah, it'll be a little bit of a gift. He's been flirting with that point per game pace, thanks to a slow start. But I think we all knew eventually he would get there. eventually he would find his groove. And, he's doing it just in time with this break coming up, but also contests against teams that he loves playing against, teams that he loves to hate, essentially. We'll see what he does against the Islanders coming out of the break. The issue with, you're right, the Islanders is usually a good contest for him. The issue is, if I'm remembering correctly, the Penguins have not started well after the holiday break. It's been a bit rough, so we'll see if they're able to jump out pretty quickly this time around. I mean, I could be wrong in my assertion there, but for what it's worth, it's still a struggling Penguins team in certain ways. We saw what they did to start this year. You just have to hope that sort of thing doesn't rear its ugly head again, and maybe Sidney Crosby takes these few days off, regroups, and finds his rhythm again to be the monster on ice that we know he is. He really hasn't stolen too many games this year, which is something
he did on Thursday.
Yeah, did on Thursday
last week.
Yeah, but other than that, I mean, they're few and far between in the 24-25 season. The Penguins are going to need him to steal quite a few more, especially if they want to stay in this hunt like they are.
Yeah, you mentioned they sometimes struggle out of the Christmas break. I think that's typically once they get past New Year's, especially last year. They won 7-0 on Long Island, their first game out of Christmas break. And then they also won back-to-back that following weekend against the Blues and then again against the Islanders. I think before that, though, they did struggle. They got crushed against the Islanders the one year. But last year, hey, can we repeat that? 2 wins, 1 at home, 1 on the road against the New York Islanders right after Christmas. That'd be great for the Pittsburgh Penguins. We're going to finish off this show with a discussion about Ryan Graves. But before that, I want to ask you a question, Horwat. It is, as listeners tune into this, Christmas Eve. If you had to choose one of the albums behind you, I see Charlie Brown Christmas and I see Michael Bublé Christmas. If you had to choose one to play on a loop, Christmas Story style, all day on December 25th, which one are you picking?
It would be Bublé, easy. I mean, Michael Bublé has great regular music, let alone his Christmas album, which is iconic. And Michael Bublé, to even tie it back into a hockey podcast like we have here, has grown a connection with the NHL that has been incredible. I mean, he was one of the celebrity coaches or whatever it was for the All-Star game last year. He just lent his song to Hockey Night in Canada the other night. That's an awesome what's it called? An awesome combination. It's an awesome collaboration, those two, that the NHL and Michael Bublé have been doing. He also is part owner of the WHL's, the name's escaping me, but one of the WHL teams, I believe. And, he's had a fondness for hockey his whole life, still very clearly does. And his Christmas album gets played in my head all the time during this time of year. And I'm sure I will honestly be playing it at least twice on Christmas morning. So I would say that one. I'm trying to think of the other ones that I have. I know I have Dean Martin's Christmas album out there. I have a Frank Sinatra one. And it's a good time to spin old classic records like that too.
Yeah, Michael Bublé, part owner of the WHL's Vancouver Giants.
That's what it is.
If you end up having that as a trivia question at some point down the line, you'd have to go to trivia in Vancouver. But hey, you have the answer if you need it, provided by Nick Horwat of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Another good one, just before we get into the Ryan Graves thing really quickly. It's not an album. It's a playlist on Spotify. My wife found it. It's the Ralph Lauren's Christmas playlist, whatever. It's a lot of Frank Sinatra. It's a lot of Dean Martin. It's a lot of classics. And for somebody like me who really enjoys those, phenomenal album. So, check that out, or playlist, I guess. Not an album, but I wouldn't mind getting that pressed on a vinyl as well. But let's finish off this episode talking about Ryan Graves, because, listen, I understand this is a guy that not many people are going to go to bat for, and I understand he hasn't performed very, very well, certainly not up to par with the contract that he signed in the summer of 2020. That would have been 2023, whenever he signed a 6-year deal with the Penguins. But it's kind of interesting to look at this and say, do they really have a plan for number 27? I mean, scratched for 5 games at the beginning of this month. Then he played in 6 straight, and in those games, he played very sheltered minutes. He was last among Penguins defensemen in ice time per game. But in those minutes, he was playing pretty well. He was leading the blue line in expected goals allowed per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 during those games. And yet, Saturday, he gets scratched for P.O. Joseph, which is the 9th time this season that Ryan Graves has been a healthy scratch. And this just makes me want to ask the question, what is the plan for Ryan Graves? Because they've wanted him to build confidence, and yet they've played him exclusively on the bottom pairing, even when there have been openings in the top 4 due to injury. And now he's eating healthy scratches in favor of P.O. Joseph, who, I get it, you traded for, you're not going to trade for him just to sit him. But, there are other ways that you could go about doing this in which you continue to build that confidence for Graves and continue to build off of some decent play that he's had in that bottom pairing.
I have a couple of theories growing in my head on this. One of them makes sense and is probably more realistic. The other one is unlikely, but I'll get to in a minute. Starting with the realistic one, I can remember I asked Mike Sullivan, this was 2 seasons ago now. This was when we still had Jeff Petrie on the team, when there was still Jan Ruda around. The Penguins traded for, I forget his name now, Dmitry Kulikov. I asked Mike Sullivan, because they didn't trade a defenseman away the entire time. They just added Kulikov in. I asked him essentially about if this competition they're essentially building, or if they are building a defensive competition, how that should do. I mean, is there now, I think I asked him essentially, is there now a competition on the blue line? He's point blank said yes. And it was much less of a competition as the season went on, because I think just Kulikov stayed in until, he got hurt.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. So
him and Nick Bonino.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it was. That's correct. Now I'm on track again. Yeah, it was a competition until they were no longer in the lineup. So it filtered out pretty quickly. Last year, there was a bit less of a competition, but now that they've added P.O. Joseph back into the fold, there is a Matt Grzelcyk there. There is Owen Pickering here. There's a bit of a competition again, and maybe that's what this is. It is spurring Ryan Graves to battle through all these other guys in the in the lineup right now to get his space back and find his way back into the lineup. I mean, that's usually just what happens whenever teams add names like that. It's suddenly, now you're adding to the competition. You're adding to the in-season competition that essentially what has been going on with the Penguins for the last couple seasons. But now, again, you're adding the new name of P.O. There's a bit more to it. My other theory is, and it's a bit more of a long shot, they're preserving him because Kyle Dubas is on the phones. He's working the phones. He's trying to figure out a way to keep him healthy, shelter him to maybe bump the draft stock. And by shelter, I mean, here are the few minutes he's playing. He's looking good. Take him out. I'm on the phone.
Yeah.
That team doesn't want him. Okay, put him back in. Boost the draft stock. Boost the draft stock. And I'm on the phone. Take him out. Again, that one's a bit more, a bit less likely just because who's taking Ryan Graves right now.
Yeah.
But, anything's possible in the NHL. Kyle Dubas might be able to work wonders. We'll see.
I was going to say, it is very hard to trade an $18 million healthy scratch. So I understand the thinking behind it is, hey, he's played well. The longer you keep him out there, the more likely it is that he regresses back to what he was last season, which was unplayable and untradeable. Right now, he's probably still untradeable, but he's not unplayable, which opens up the door partially for that second half of that, which is the tradable part. But putting him in the press box again, right? I mean, that's now would be technically 6 of his last 12. He's been scratched half of the last dozen games. That's hard to trade whenever you have $18 million strapped to his back, 4.5 a year. And I understand the salary cap is expected to rise considerably, but again, expected to and does are 2 different things, first of all. And second of all, do you really want to be fitting Ryan Graves at 4.5 under your cap? Probably not. Dealing with a guy like, we've had that conversation, made that argument for Ricard Rakell, if he's a trade piece later in this season, because he has 3 years left at a pretty high cap number, and said, well, you know what? He's scoring so well now, even if he falls off, it's worth it because the cap's going to go up. Ryan Graves at 4.5, whenever he's playing even better, probably still closer to 2.5 right now, as far as market value. I'm not saying that that's the hard and fast number, but eye test wise, that's what it feels like. It just feels like if the plan is to try to get him enough value just to get him off the books, they're not doing that in the right way. If the plan is to actually build his confidence, scratching him for 6 of the 12 is not the right way, especially whenever you say, oh, maybe it's just a competition. And yet, Matt Grzelcyk has struggled very mightily, and Grzelcyk is not a great penalty killer Graves is a pretty decent penalty killer this year. It's a matter of, oh, well, you need Grzelcyk for the power play. Really? Like, I understand he's performed well on the power play, but do you need him on the power play over a guy like Kris Letang, over a guy like Erik Karlsson? Like, you shouldn't need him on the power play. He's been good, but this is an argument that a lot of people have made is, hey, listen, at least Matt Grzelcyk is pretty good on the power play. That's great, but you got two guys that should be able to handle those duties. Like,
Yeah.
Keeping him in the lineup because he is a good power play guy on a team where he should be the third power play defenseman is not a reason in my eyes, because I just don't think, even though I thought he played a decent game on Saturday, Matt Grzelcyk, I don't think that his power play proficiencies outweigh his struggles when it comes to defending his own zone at any level. I mean, power play, 5-on-5 or anything. So I just think it's really interesting that they've preached all off season long that they want to build Ryan Graves' confidence, to see it work out in Pittsburgh. And yet, whenever he plays well, they don't reward him for that. In fact, they do the opposite and they take him out of the lineup. I don't know what the plan is. And I understand that a lot of people are going to say, who cares? He's out of the lineup. Asset management wise, I feel like that's not a good thing, and it's going to end to more bad things for the Penguins if they continue to do it.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, I just had my theories. As for Matt Grzelcyk, I mean, he's not Patrick Laine in terms of he's only scored power play goals. Even Patrick Laine knows he needs to improve in the 5-on-5 space. But Matt Grzelcyk, that's not the same player. Patrick Laine can be a power play weapon. Matt Grzelcyk is doing good things offensively this year. Okay, cool. What about the defensive side of the game? Like we just talked about with pairing him with Kris Letang, or trying to be a Dumoulin replacement almost. It's hard to do that, and he's not providing that. Ryan Graves wasn't providing that either. Again, it's just, you're kind of shelving him to the point of, I don't know, losing confidence, losing everything you might have building and momentum.
Yeah. Momentum was a big word that I was thinking of right there. So I'm glad.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's maybe he was building something with that momentum. Everyone discussed last year of, maybe he can Paul Martin this. He had the bad first year, but he's able to come back next year. I mean, everyone would immediately respond to that with, yeah, but Paul Martin's a different player.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's all a tough situation. It's all a lot of competition that's going on. I think that's sort of in my head where I'm going to base a lot of how I see this defense going forward, because Owen Pickering has been called up for so long, has been playing so well. Matt Grzelcyk has done his duties in a way. P.O. Joseph is back in the fold. I mean, Jack St. Ivany before his injury was in the fold quite a bit. Ryan Shea is still around. There's a lot of names all of a sudden floating around this defense that have NHL talent and have NHL abilities. It'll be up to Ryan Graves to sort of fight through the muck and prove that he should be in the lineup over Owen Pickering, especially if Owen Pickering's rookie heat cools off.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to be ready for that opportunity, and I would assume he's a professional. He'll be able to be ready to go and step in when he can. Won't be to the level that Chad Ruhwedel was, but all those years of he's sitting for 15 games, he's back in for 4. You know how good he was for those 4? He's sitting for another 10. This is a bit of a different player, but if Ryan Graves can do anything, it is a bare minimum, be ready. And if Kyle Dubas gets that right phone call, there's no reason why he shouldn't be taking it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that should obviously be on the table, because at 4 more years of this, you'd like to be able to free yourself of that, especially when you're trying to do whatever shotgun rebuild, whatever term you put on it. But when I look at Ryan Graves, I see somebody who has earned more of an opportunity this year than he's been given. And the fact that he has that contract makes it a little bit more, sense of urgency here. Let's make sure that this guy can continue to build on that momentum, because unless another general manager is going to bail out the Penguins, and we have seen general managers bail out other general managers and all the layers of the sports world. Unless that happens, though, I just don't see a way in which, specifically this season, the Penguins offload Ryan Graves. Not without eating a significant portion of his salary, or without doing it for future considerations and getting literally nothing in return except for 4 more years of retained salary and absolutely nothing.
Call up Anaheim.
Yeah.
Call up Anaheim.
Unless somebody wants to bail him out, shout out the Anaheim Ducks. I think I don't know if they're going to be able to do that twice in a season, especially considering Trouba is essentially double what Ryan Graves is. But, it's a situation to follow. And it's just something that you see him take that stretch of healthy scratches. He gets back in. And I thought, not every game was great, but I didn't think it got to the point where it's like, you got to sit him for P.O. Joseph. And I thought Joseph looked pretty decent too, but on Saturday. But, all in all, it's going to be a story to follow for the rest of the season, how they manage this defense, especially with the insertion of P.O. Joseph.
You think Chicago will take him on?
Probably not.
It's a fire call.
Yeah. It is. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe if you liked this video, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas from our family to yours. And we'll see you guys on Thursday.